I now call this meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to order. I'm Tyler Riley, cop and a half.
I'm Melissa Maley, the spy.
I'm Tristan Miller, the saucy sleuth, sticking with it.
I'm Travis McElroy, boy detective.
Perfect.
Hey!
I thought about going with man detective, but I just don't know if that sends all the right signals.
I'm a man detective.
I'm a man detective. Or perhaps I search for men. I don't know. Say Martian Manhunter. Who can...
The sequel to Mindhunter, Manhunter.
I'm here for it.
The most dangerous game.
Today,
go. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll do it.
Okay.
Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/ADCpod and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title free and start listening. It's that easy. Go to audibletrial.com/ADCpod.
Oh man, I'm so glad that Audible is the sponsor because that's how I listen to all my Poirot novels.
Same.
Awesome.
Yeah. I love that Hugh Fraser.
Yep.
Yes.
He's so good. Did we all listen to this one on Audible?
Yeah.
No.
No. Ooh, look at me. I'm Tyler. I'm literate. Ooh.
I have free time to sit down and look at words on the page.
No, Tyler needs to take notes, and I can do that by using the book as a reference.
Great.
Fair
So we have a Travis McElroy in the room, the
virtual room.
the virtual room, and I would love for you to explain who you are, Travis. Give you a little agency.
Well, I'm a simple man with love in my heart and a song in my heart and also joy in my heart. It's pretty crowded in there. So I am primarily a professional full-time podcaster. I do 3 full-time shows, My Brother, and Me, which is an advice show that I do with my brothers where we don't actually give advice. The Adventure Zone, which is an actual play podcast with my brothers and dad, where currently we are playing Dungeons and Dragons. And also an etiquette podcast with my wife called Schmanners, where we talk about the history of etiquette, how it actually, like certain topics like elbows on the table or like thank you notes, that kind of thing, how they actually started and how they apply in the modern day. And mostly what we found on that show is that etiquette was invented for awkward people so that they would understand what to do at a party and when they could leave. And it's really great.
Fantastic.
I have also over time done a bunch of other podcasts. We've also adapted the Adventure Zone into graphic novels, which ended up being New York Times #1 bestsellers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm legally obligated to say we are adapting the Adventure Zone into an animated series or at least we're developing it right now, and then hopefully it will go to series on Peacock, new streaming network. Bunch of other stuff. I have 2 kids. Important.
That's amazing. And we wanted to tell you that the reason that we started this podcast in the first place is because you and your brother and your dad were talking about Poirot and how much you love them, and we thought we would read a couple books.
Yeah, I mean, it is my older brother's fault that I like Poirot, as is often the case. This is, I think, if people with siblings, this is pretty universally true, which is like they will read something or watch something or play a game or something, finish it, and then like hand it to you and say like, now you read it, and you're like, okay. So like, I have always been a fan of detective stories. I like mysteries. I like the actual mysteries where it's like, if you are paying attention, you could hypothetically solve it on your own. I mean, I reference Boy Detective. I grew up reading any Encyclopedia Brown book I could get my hands on, and I really loved like trying to solve it on my own. I am an abstract, creative problem solver. I am to shorthand that I'm a fixer. I like finding solutions to things, and so I've always been into it. And then I kind of fell out of the reading game when my daughter was born, because I was working from home, so I didn't have like long drives to listen to things, and I didn't have time to like sit and read anything. But I was on vacation with my brother, Justin, and he was like in the middle of listening to, well, I guess he was reading the entire Poirot canon, and he was like, I think you'd really like this. And I was like, okay, which one should I start with? And he was like, well, technically there's all these ones you could start with, but you should start with Murder on the Orient Express. And I said, okay. And then I listened to all of it in like a day and a half. Yeah. I could not stop. And I stand by that. I think that it is a pretty damn near perfect story. And so like I immediately started listening to all of them. Like I found, you know, a list of like, here is the order in which you need to listen to these. And I listened to, at least as far as I know there's like a bunch of other ones I haven't listened to, but I'm looking at the list of ones I've listened to. It's probably about 30 or 40 that I listened to all the way through. And then about 6 months later, listened to all the way through again. I've like jumped around and listened to certain ones that I like multiple other times.
Oh, fantastic. So you've actually listened to quite a bit more than we have at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, but ask me how much of it I remember.
Fair.
I mean, it's the kind of thing where, like, before we sat down to record this, I looked up the synopsis for Cards on the Table, and I instantly was like, oh yes, I remember all of this now. But like, this is continued on for me. If you're listening to this and you want another excellent like modern detective series to listen to, Maureen Johnson put out a series of books. The first one is called Truly Devious. It's about the Truly Devious murders. It is set in like a boarding school in upstate Vermont, I believe, and it's like a like teenage girl detective, and it is incredibly well written. It was another one, like when I finished the first one, I didn't realize it was a series, and the first one ended, and I was like, wait, what? Hold on. And I was so overjoyed to find out like all of them were already out, because I was like so worried that I was like, wait, do I have to wait?
Oh, no.
Yeah. So good. Start with Truly Devious. They're very great. And like Knives Out and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like, this is an actual mystery. Like, for example, I've also watched a lot of the first like 4 or 5 seasons of CSI. I'm not proud of this. There was a time on Spike TV in like the 2000s where like every day Spike TV showed like 7 episodes of CSI.
Yeah.
And I would just sit and watch them. And the thing is in a CSI episode, the actual culprit is basically usually introduced in the last 10 minutes of the episode.
Yeah.
Right.
And, like, it's not actually a mystery in that like there have not been clues all along the way. They're doing the investigation, but it's not like, and obviously it was this guy. It's always like, wait, did she just say she had a brother? I'm like,
Yeah.
Wait, we didn't know
It comes
anything
out
about
of nowhere.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
I want to say thank you, Travis, because we were having this discussion the other week of whether or not procedurals are mysteries, and I'm glad you're on my side.
Some of them are.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there are probably ones, like, for example, Lucifer is basically a procedural. It's also very, very good. If you haven't watched it, it starts as like a procedural detective show and evolves into a really wonderful kind of like mythical. It's based off of Neil Gaiman's Sandman series. The Lucifer, that is the Lucifer from Neil Gaiman's Sandman.
Oh, nice.
It's incredible. But that one is a lot more like mystery. But even then, like, the problem is, I think in procedural TV shows, the reason I think it's easier to write, not that it's easy, but it's easier to write a detective novel than it is to make a detective TV show, is you can have a detective in a novel, like, address something, look at something or whatever, and it has the exact same significance as every other sentence until you go back and look at it after you know the solution. But in a TV show, if you like zoomed in on a piece of evidence, I'm like, okay, that's important then. And it's a lot easier, I think, for an audience to get ahead of you when you're making a TV show, because they only see what you want them to see in that. And so they know what to pay attention to a little bit better. So I think you have to obfuscate the clues a lot more in a TV show. Anyways, I don't think that they are detective series as far as main focus. I think that they can be, and I think that there are definitely ones that do. For example, I mean, I don't think it's procedural, but like the Sherlock series, that, I mean, it's the same. Which is a long way to say most of them are not. But I think that some of them are, but I think it takes a very deft hand to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like Murder, She Wrote, we've been watching a bit of Murder, She Wrote, which is what I was raised on. That's, I think, what got me into detective stuff. Feels like somewhere in between, even though she's not a police officer or something like that.
Right. Well, I grew up watching a lot of Columbo, and like, I think that is close. But I think even that was like, it was a lot easier to do that when it was like single camera, like not a lot of editing required. It didn't have to have any kind of fast-paced action. Like in Columbo, as far as I can remember, there's like no car chases and running and gunning or anything, right?
Yeah.
So like the thing is like CSI cannot be a detective show when like half of the show is like shootouts and people getting buried alive and like it's like, for example, the one Poirot book on like the main list I'm looking at that I still have not read is The Big Four. Have you guys read that?
Yeah.
We read that one.
Yeah.
And, like, it was because Justin was like, do not read it.
Yeah.
Like it is, you will not like it. It is a bastard version of, and I was like, okay. And so like I didn't read it the first time. I skipped it in my listen, and then I like looked up a synopsis of it, and I was like, oh yeah, this sounds like garbage.
Yeah.
So, like I've just continued to skip it.
It's deeply complicated and not worth it. Specifically, the audiobook is like, I think like 9 hours. So it's like one of those things of like the time investment.
Right.
Like,
and it also is like, from what I understand, the way that it was published and stuff, tried to make it an action thriller to keep the audience engaged and stuff. And I was like, that's not what I want, though.
No, not out of Poirot.
Yeah, right. And I think that's it, right? It's like, I think the reason Sherlock, the show, resonated and is still so good and so beloved is because it did somehow find a balance of like, this is an actual detective show where like there are actual clues that you can actually put together, but also the stakes feel very high. It is very like adrenaline filled and stuff, but without that ever being the primary focus. But I think that is 1 in a million, right? Because I think most of the time, either you are watching the show because you enjoy action, or you're watching the show because you enjoy seeing a mystery solved. And very, very rarely are there things that encompass both, right? One has to take precedent over the other. And I think that's why we see, like, there are so many more police procedurals where about the action, because that's a lot easier to write than a mystery. I've tried. Man, there was a time where I was like, I could write a mystery, and I cannot. At least as far as I know, not yet.
Oh boy, it must be very tricky. I think we've had discussions about like where you even start. Like, do you start with who did it? Do you start with and work backwards? Like, or do you just start writing and see what happens? I don't know. I think some people do it both ways.
Right. Well, the thing that now, as an author,
yes,
the thing that I know now that I did not know, and I was like, I don't know, when's the last time I sat down and tried to write a novel? I was 14. The thing I did not know then was like, you don't have to know any of it. You can just write out the thing and then say like, okay, all of this is complete garbage, but now I know what the arc of it is. I know who did it, and like, I have I've been talking with my therapist a lot about my creative process, and I spent about a half hour yesterday comparing my creative process to making sourdough bread, and it very much is like I have made now like 12 loaves in 3 weeks, or maybe more, maybe 4 weeks, but anyways, a lot and a little during this like self-isolation time. And
very Christ-like.
Thank you. I've taken the loaves, I've broken them up, shared them amongst my followers.
We just add
Your children.
That's all true. Okay, wait. But anyways, but the thing is like the reason I keep making them is like I'm slightly tweaking the recipe, right? And I'm trying to find the right combination of like, okay, well, I think this needs a little more salt and maybe mix the bread flour with all purpose, like that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, it can be a continual process. It's not like, well, I baked this one loaf and that's the loaf I'm stuck with. So like that's how I think the writing process has to work. Is you write a draft, you get all the way through it, and you're like, oh God, this is all bad, but I finished it, and now I know what it actually should be.
Absolutely. You just kind of throw things at the wall and see what sticks.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you. What was because the second arc in Adventure Zone is a mystery, murder mystery. How is that adapting it for the comic book?
So yeah, it was very tricky. The nice thing is like it because a train is a very inherently linear thing, right?
Point A to point B.
As you're moving down it, it's a lot like sometimes in video games, right? A game will have the appearance of an open world where it's like you could explore anything, but they very creatively kept you on a linear path that doesn't feel restrictive. And I think that is one of the best things about Murder on the Orient Express is that it provides stakes, right? Like once we're off this train, we're out in the world. Anybody can go anywhere. We have a limited amount of time, but also like it is a contained space where if there are clues, we know that they are in this 10-foot by 4-foot area.
Mm-hmm.
So when we were adapting it, we were then kind of working on like, well, now we know what is happening, and then you have to be careful not to like take for granted that like whoever's reading it knows what's happening and all those things. And so we pared back a little bit with the mystery, with the clues, because you can convey a lot more visually. I actually think it's possible that the best combination of the visual elements of like making a TV show or movie and the like text elements of writing a book is like every detective thing should be a graphic novel. It's like a great combination of like you can show clues when you want to, but also you can just have someone's face talking for a while and that's totally fine.
Yes.
I feel now that I've said it, a thing I just realized I feel very strongly about.
Absolutely.
Here's my Encyclopedia Brown graphic novels.
Oh,
yeah. TM. That's mine. I'm sending it right now.
Excellent. So today we are reading Cards on the Table. Well, we already read it. We're not reading it as we did the podcast.
Here's the audiobook.
That's a lovely snuff box, said Poirot.
I don't know what you mean.
Yeah. Stuff.
Yeah. Cards on the Table by Agatha Christie, which is, as you might have expected, a Hercule Poirot mystery.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we just get into it?
Yeah.
I think we shall.
Great. I actually did read the book and listen to the audiobook alternately. Had it on my Kindle back and forth.
You're doing Whisper Sync.
Yeah. I tried it for the first time. Now, did everybody have the foreword in their edition, in the audiobook edition?
No.
I did not have time to read it.
No.
So.
Okay.
Mine just went straight into it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, the foreword is fun because it's Agatha Christie coming in and saying, I'm going to tell you a little something about this book.
Oh.
Yeah. And the way she set it up, I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to be, but basically she said, so in this one, we have 4 suspects. That is it. That's all we're doing. And you get to see Poirot working out the psychology of each of those 4 suspects. And for a brief moment, I was hoping that it might be an alternate ending kind of novel, a choose your own adventure, like The Mystery of Edmund Drood the musical, which is a delightful thing to see because the audience picks what happens in Edmund Drood, because of course Dickens didn't write the whole thing. But yes, I digress. But yeah, so she sets that up, and she says when Poirot told Hastings about it, Hastings found it rather dull. But it was one of Poirot's favorite cases.
Uh-huh.
I like that because like that didn't happen. That's not a real thing. But I think like that it just continued on like Hastings thought he was boring. Like, why would you include that?
Yeah. Way to
It's such a
self-dunk.
Hastings. Yeah.
It's the extended universe of Poirot in this,
You guys already like gone deep into depth, like conversation about comparing Watson and Hastings. You guys already done that? Because that's one of my favorite things to think about. All that is like I always feel like Hastings is an answer to Watson. There's a lot more of just like I don't want to. Okay, fine.
Oh, fascinating. Do you know I am very ignorant of all things Sherlock Holmes. It is my big gap.
I am too.
Yeah.
I've read some of it. It doesn't grip me.
Yeah, it does not resonate with me either. I've tried. There's even Stephen Fry reading it, and I still,
Although one of my favorite lines ever written is Holmes ejaculated out of the window.
Yeah.
I'm really happy.
Oh, I can't wait to see that in the next season of Succession. Oh my God.
I think that's right. I think it's right there in the beginning in A Study in Scarlet. Like he throws over the window and yells something, and the parenthetical is Holmes ejaculated out of the window. Like, okay.
Nice.
It really paints a visual picture.
That did not happen on Elementary, I'll tell you that much.
But we then get into the book, and Poirot is having a discussion with this guy, Shaitana.
Yeah.
Who, Shaitana. And this guy sounds like kind of a goth Gatsby. Yeah,
he's like a neckbeard, which is I appreciate. He's a milady, I think.
A little. What's interesting is the way he is described. I think you could cast him in a movie or TV show 1,000 different ways.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Because I pictured him, and maybe this is just the way like Hugh Fraser reads it. I pictured him as a larger guy, like stout, broad-shouldered kind of guy. And then I was reading in a synopsis that it was like he is described as like the devil, which would imply more angular and maybe taller and leaner and like.
Yeah, he is like a.
What I'm not wild about, I will say.
Yeah.
This reads very, like the description of him and the way he acts is very like period racist.
Yes. Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Foreign guy, and I don't know if we trust him. Like,
yeah.
I was actually about to go there because, as the listeners of this podcast know, I love me some racism in these books because it's period and appropriate. And I actually highlighted the bit where they're talking about Mr. Shaitana. Whether Mr. Shaitana was an Argentine or a Portuguese or a Greek or some other nationality rightly despised by the insular Britain, nobody knew.
Oh, yeah.
We don't know what he is, but we know we don't like him.
Yeah.
A doof.
And this is page 3. And I'm just like, off the bat, like, let's just get into the racism, y'all.
Boom.
Oh, yeah. We just dive right into that racism. And we talk about this a lot throughout the book because there's a lot of characters. You know, as we go through, just assume that this is just peppered in with everyone being really racist and sexist too. Ooh.
Yeah.
But hello, my dog.
Puppy. I think a puppy appeared.
Yes, Romeo.
I also like it's such a weird framing device, but it's just like right out the gate, like, you know, there's like a exhibit of snuff boxes, you know, like you do, you know, how you go to the snuff box fair.
It's like Antiques Roadshow, but like with snuff boxes only.
Yes.
I can't get a snuff. Oh, that's
Oh,
not box.
There it
Yeah.
is. Oh boy.
The thing about Shaitan that's very interesting to me as a character
Mhm.
is it is unclear because we don't get to spend a lot of time with him compared to like the chunk of the book. He is a very like important character to the plot, but we don't spend a lot of time with him. And that is interesting. Spoiler alert for the victim, right? For him to be introduced as he is like the inciting incident and also the victim is not always the case. But the thing is about it is I can't get a read on whether he is competent and just because like here's the thing. He's like, I'm going to invite all of these murderers into my house and imply that I know they're murderers. Totally chill. And it's like, whoa, my dude,
I think
this might
just-
break bad for you.
He just
Yeah.
lives how I expect Johnny Depp to. I
Oh,
don't know him, but I feel that energy from him.
yeah, the
Yeah,
stars.
I think that's a good call because, like, I think on my first read, I was like, is he a criminal genius? Is he like,
Mhm.
I think I first read him as like a criminal, not necessarily like that he would steal things, but maybe like he's a fence or
Are you
he's
talking
like,
about Johnny Depp here, or
no, either way, it works either way. But that like he knows people who know people, like he can
Mhm.
get you things. He's kind of like on the shadier side, but maybe he is just kind of like a playboy gadabout kind of idiot.
Yeah, I think he's just really horny for the thrill of knowing that he could die.
I think
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
he's a
And-
dilettante
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
murder.
So I didn't get the feeling that he was actually blackmailing these people.
Oh no.
Just that he knew their secrets.
Hmm.
And everyone apparently hates him,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
always goes to his parties because they're awesome. He
Yeah.
sounds like a really cool guy. Big
Because
fan.
he's ethnic and exotic.
though, if he was dumb, right? Of like great
Yeah.
part, weird dude.
Yeah.
True.
I mean,
That's a good call.
I
It
think
could
That's
be
fair.
that.
yeah, we've all been to college.
I think that this is what it breaks down to is that he is a power like hungry like he probably really enjoys when they're sitting around the table and he's like talking about like poison, what's a motive for murder, and like seeing the looks on people's faces is
Mhm.
not like he's probably really getting off on that, right? Of just like
Yeah.
I am fully running this, like I am in control. And I think that's probably why people do not like him. Of like he is probably the originator of the weird flex. Of just like this guy who's just like, I know that someone in this room committed murder. Like, okay, all right. What a weird thing to say. Cool, dude.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I love
basically,
this- oh, go ahead.
at the beginning of this story, we get Poirot and our friend Chaitana talking about, like, oh, I collect murderer friends. It's great. And so why don't you come over
I'm
for
a
a dinner
4chan
party?
user.
Oh boy. Why don't you come over for dinner and I'll invite some of them. It'll be awesome. Let's arrange this real cool dinner party.
He says something at one point that made me think of you, Melissa.
Oh,
Oh.
I love true crime. This is a thing that.
This is what I'm getting to.
Yeah.
But my dear, why? A stupid, bungled butchering business. Yes, I agree with you. But murder can be an art. A murderer can be an artist. And Melissa, as you have just pronounced, you love you some true crime. Would you agree that murder can be an art?
No. So the fascination with me for true crime, I mean, while it is kind of amazing in a like Mindhunter kind of fascination way of how some people do accomplish it, I wouldn't put the word art on it, because that implies something else to me. It implies something like more positive.
There's a lot of bad art.
Yeah,
That's
that's
true.
true. I think that there's a lot to be said of like, for example, if I think about crime as an art, the only thing I can think of is like movie examples, right? Of like Thomas Crown Affair and Ocean's 11 and stuff. I don't know how many people there are in real life that are like pulling off these elaborate murder heists.
Well,
but
sorry, go ahead.
At least not on a regular basis.
No, because serial killers get worse, or they're not great at it at first, and then they like great at it, meaning like they don't know what is. They kind of dip their toes in the water, and then they progress and usually end up getting sloppy, which is how they get caught.
Right.
Thankfully.
And, I also think it's interesting, right, that he introduces this idea of like murder can be art and everything, but then it seems like the people he picks for the party are like not great at it.
No. I think the only thing that he means by that these people were great at it is that they didn't get caught.
Yeah. I would say one crime is absolutely art, and that's graffiti.
That's fair. That is fair. Or if you somehow, rather than steal a painting from a museum, put a painting into a museum.
That'll show the Louvre.
That's like, don't accept my painting, will you? I'm hang it there.
Ooh.
I love that.
Then they go to the party, right?
Yeah.
They do, yes.
At the party, this is what I really like about this novel. I don't think that this is a perfect novel by any means, but I really, really like that it has such a strong like framing device to it.
Oh yeah.
That is actually that works very well, which is like, here are 4 detectives, 4 criminals, and like so we have this like cross section like grid of like who's working on who and what is how, that it's a very organized, it's like a game of bridge. I mean, the framework of it works, of like there are opponents, people playing against each other paired off, and like I think it really works well to help keep track of all the different players without ever being like, now wait, who is the one that is being accused of what? I think it is structured well.
Oh yeah. I was so grateful that we didn't have a million people to keep track of, and then the maid we meet once, and it reads easy.
Yeah.
It's really digestible. Good quarantine read. While your thoughts are floating about in your brain. This is nice to settle them down without having to, you feel smart because you can keep track of them, but then you don't also need a ton of attention to try and make sure you know exactly who everybody is at all times.
Though knowing how to play bridge certainly would have helped.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
I have no idea.
I have a loose idea of it only as it compares to euchre. Another
I
game
hardly know her.
I know how to play. But basically, from what I understand, like you take hands. That's all I know. That's really...
Yeah. When they were talking about rubbers and dummies and all these terms that I've never heard in my entire life before.
Yeah, like rubbers and dummies. I was like, it's about to get real weird, and I'm here for it.
Even Stephen Sondheim is like, stop.
Great about it is it reminds me a lot of like I've also read some of like the Ian Fleming James Bond novels, which are quite different. And if we're going to talk about sexist and racist, than the movies, but it just assumes that you have a familiarity with Baccarat in a way that you're like, okay, you're just kind of flying through. It's the same with this with Bridge. Like, oh my God, can we talk about poker, please? Or something like blackjack.
Texas Hold'em, checkers.
Gin is as far as I go with like card games with rules.
Just let's talk about Go Fish or like War, Egyptian romance.
Yeah. I'd say
exactly.
If you've ever played Rook, it feels very similar to that.
Nope.
Okay.
No, thank you.
But they're at this party.
There's so many card games that have so many rules, and this is one of them. And in the written edition, they do also give us the scorecards, the illustrated scorecards. And I'm holding up my phone like it has it on it. It is kind of because, well, we'll get to that later. But yes, so they're at this party, and first, he has the 4 detective type people arrive.
Yeah, sleuths.
Yeah.
The
And I also
sleuths.
love how they are announced at the top, like, of the party. Like, you know, they have the house staff, and now ask them their name, announce them to the room. I wish more people did that at parties.
Agreed.
Yes.
It's like, this is Jim. I know
Sometimes
him
I
from
just
work.
for myself when I walk into a room, and I'm just like, Travis McElroy.
First of his name.
And I'm like, if this was a podcast, I'd announce myself. Why is...
Absolutely.
Can I talk about how much I love Mrs. Oliver?
Oh my gosh,
Yes.
yes. So I wrote down that she is described as a hot-headed feminist. And I'm like, she sounds fantastic. Love her.
Ariadne Oliver.
What a name.
And she's a recurring character, right?
Yes,
That is what,
She does come back.
she has been in another Agatha Christie book that was not a Poirot book.
Okay.
Cool.
No, because I looked it up. I wish I knew that off the top of my head, but I don't. But it was like one of the like Pren mysteries or something. But what I love about it is she is so very clearly an avatar for Agatha Christie. Like she talks about, it's not Belgian, but like that she, that she writes a series of novels with this character that everyone loves and she finds annoying. I love it. Because that's just, can you imagine like reading that for the first time and just how funny that would have been to just like in the middle of this, like someone's been murdered. It's like, and here's this character that seems like it is just written for like the audience to be like, I get it. Right. And just like that makes me so happy. Like that to me gives me more insight into Agatha Christie than any interview or biography or anything I could ever read. Is like she is lampooning herself, lampooning her own character in an actual novel. She didn't just like draw a comic strip or whatever. She wrote a main character into a novel to make fun of herself.
Oh, yes. So good.
And
she's fantastic.
I like how also she's like, I don't know anything about Finnish people. Finnish people will write me. Apparently, it's big in Finland. I hate it. So apparently, I assume people from Belgium were like, you got this wrong.
No doubt. Oh, absolutely. Yes.
She's also, I think, the second most competent sleuth. I think, like,
oh, for sure.
Her and Poirot are like...
I would argue that she's more competent than Poirot because she accuses 2 people once the murder happens and does pretty well for herself.
Yeah.
Fair.
True. Yes, we also meet Superintendent Battle, who is from Scotland Yard, and he's acquainted with Mrs. Oliver. Apparently, she's always coming in and saying, well, if a woman was in charge of Scotland Yard.
I love this idea of her just like barging in a meeting. Like they're in the middle of something, you know?
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah, and then just leaving.
Yeah.
Just saying that and just out the door.
Yep, 2 fingers.
Oh, boy. And then we meet, what is it, Sergeant or Colonel Race?
Colonel Race.
Yeah. And did I just blank when he came along in the subsequent parts of the novel, or was he
no,
not really...
he's pretty easy to miss.
Yeah,
okay.
He's like
book,
shows up twice.
Yeah, I think Superintendent Battle and Race, from what I can remember, and I think it says a lot, seem fairly interchangeable to me. Like there was not a lot of, and I ran into this a little bit with Dr. Roberts and Major John Despard too. I'm looking now at Wikipedia to remember. Is like sometimes in her novels, she has a bit of a reverse problem that a lot of dude writers have, is that sometimes her male characters become kind of homogenous. Where I'm just like, okay, wait, is that John Williamson or is that William Johnson? Which one is that? What is happening?
I had the exact same problem.
Yes. But they're both there.
Yeah.
So we have the 4 sleuths and the 4 murderers, and they have dinner, and Shaitana implies that he knows all of their murderers, and
the murderers are the 2 men you mentioned, Mrs.
Right,
Meredith.
we should talk about them, huh?
Miss Meredith.
Miss Meredith.
And then whom else?
Mrs. Lorimer.
with Mrs. Lorimer. So Despard, Lorimer, Meredith, and Roberts.
Yes.
Yes. And we get a little bit of a sense of their personalities when they first sit down, but we learn much more about them later on.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, do we ever?
Let me ask you a question.
Mm.
This is something I wondered the first time I read the book. So at this point, once they're done with like dinner and party drinks, they sit down to play bridge long into the night. This is, okay, to give a little background, this is something I just recently learned on an episode of Schmanners, right? We were talking about like Victorian dinner parties.
Ooh. And
a lot of times, Victorian dinner parties would not even begin until like 8 or 9 p.m. And then, this is like 1930s, so I'm not saying it's Victorian, but
yeah,
would not even begin until like 9 p.m. And then you wouldn't like sit down till dinner until like 10 or 11 p.m. And then these parties would sometimes go until like 2, 3, 4 in the morning, sometimes till dawn, because the way that the dinner parties worked is if you had a guest of honor, no one except the lady of the house could leave until the guest of honor left.
Oh boy.
Whoa.
The lady of the house could withdraw from a conversation to let the men talk if there was a man who was the guest of honor. But if the guest of honor just like kept staying, no one was allowed to leave or was incredibly rude. So sometimes parties could go literally till question mark.
Well, dude looks like a lady because my behind would be in bed. Sorry, not sorry.
So they sit down, they have their party drinks, and then they break off to play bridge. You have the 4 sleuths in one room and the 4 murderers in an adjoining room.
Yeah.
Shaykana is the odd person out, so he just like sits by the fire, right?
Yeah, and he's sitting by the fire in the room with the murderers.
Yes. No. So my question is this. During these games of bridge, he is murdered with a bejeweled stiletto knife.
Yes.
And the thing I wondered the first time I read it is, do you think in like kind of a great trick, but I can only do it once kind of way, that he knew he would be murdered? And it would be like, my death is going to be an epic case solved by or else why would he like, I'm going to stay in the room with the criminals. Like, I'm going to brag about that I know that they've murdered. And like, it seems like he's like tempting them to murder him so that these 4 great detectives will solve this great mystery of who murdered this great man.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I honestly did not think about it until you laid it out. But yeah, that makes complete sense. And reminds me of Neil Simon's Death by Murder.
I thought up until the very end, and they do dismiss this right away, but I was like, maybe that's a red herring, that he had committed suicide just for that reason. To be like, maybe he was sick or something.
Yeah, right.
And then he's just like, I'm done, but I get this one great, and I will never be solved.
Right, because these are all people who have gotten away with murder, right?
Exactly.
Because this is where I think it is that like tipping point of either he is a foolhardy, like blowhard idiot, or like he planned this whole thing so that there would be this epic case and he would become kind of a piece in his own collection kind of thing. And I think it's like, maybe it's somewhere in the middle of that, I don't know. But like, I the first time I read it, it seemed so obvious to me that he planned to be murdered.
Yeah.
And the second time I read it, I was like, maybe he's an idiot.
It read to me like he planned to be murdered, especially there's just so many little things, like he invites all the sleuths and he sits himself in the room with the murderers. So I mean, I think he might have, it gave me actually quite a bit of a Clue vibe for a while.
Yeah.
In Clue, I don't think that he's daring them to murder him, but yeah, it feels like a, you know what, come and get me, kind of vibe to it.
For me, I just thought it was like him letting his ego get in the way. Like he was got a little bit too big for his britches, and thought like nothing would come to him.
That's how I read it the second time. Is like is a show off, and like he is kind of like lazy, like not lazy but sloppy, maybe that he is put him aside. Why wouldn't you sit with the sleuth?
Yeah.
Right.
Stay in the room with the murderers.
Why would you face your back away from the murderers?
Well, you know how racially ambiguous people be.
Oh boy.
Alright, so they're playing
According
bridge.
to the book.
Yes. Yes.
They're playing bridge. People are winning. People are losing. Because they know when to hold them and they know when to fold them. And during the course of that, as Travis said, he gets murdered with a bejeweled stiletto knife, which is a collectible, which I feel like the equivalent, I don't know, would be like getting murdered with the sword of Aragorn or something. Also, I feel like the modern equivalent of playing bridge deep into the night is how many times I've just sat and played Halo with my friends and gotten drunk in the past.
Yeah, he was playing Halo when someone stabbed him with the sword of Aragorn.
Exactly. Yes,
That would be
Tyler.
a much different scenario.
Yes. And I like how there's this moment where Poirot goes over to him and basically, the not Battle and not Poirot, the other male sleuth. What's his name? Race goes over and basically gives him a yikes face. Gives Poirot a yikes face, like, come on over here. It's like, ooh,
Oh boy!
ooh. And then Poirot comes back and goes, ooh, and then Battle shows up. He's like, oh, dang, this guy's definitely dead. I was just about to leave. I was literally just about to leave.
I also really like, by the way, and I'm sure maybe I'm sure that there's writing in this where Agatha Christie explains it very well. But how just like right off the bat, they're like, well, none of the sleuths did it. So,
Yeah, which,
like,
Oh yeah, I caught that too. It was wild to me it's a good few chapters. I just sat there being like, it has to be one of these people. Like none of the other folks could have done it. I guess the idea of like them all being in the same room with him makes it more obvious because of witnesses. I don't know.
Yeah.
I suspected Miss Oliver, is it? The proxy for Agatha?
Yeah.
I thought that would have been dope. So she's like, once again, it's one of the scenarios of like she created a murder to then write about a murder.
Or just like, hey, we can all agree this guy sucks, right? Like, this is fine. This is fine.
Yeah.
Gotta go.
So then at this point begins the like, okay, cool. We need to figure this out. And she goes out of her way. I keep saying they as though like I'm talking about the sleuths and not, the author. So she, Agatha Christie, goes out of her way to make it clear like this stiletto was so sharp. Anyone could have done it without him making a sound, which I'm just now thinking about like how horrifying because that he didn't even like cry. He just was immediately dead.
Yeah.
So scary.
With like a smile on his face, I think is like another reason. Maybe I'm misremembering that, but I feel like they talk about like he looks like he's at peace or he's still asleep basically, which is another indication that I think he totally wants to get got.
Yeah,
fair.
totally amused by the whole thing.
So then they start an investigation and they're like, well, I don't know that we're going to figure out who killed Shaitana. So let's instead investigate the four killers to see if we can figure out who might have a similar psychology to this, who might have like had, motive to do it. And this is introduced one of my favorite, just like kind of offhanded, like, yeah, we all agree that they're like, well, Shaitana was pretty smart. So he probably wasn't wrong about all of them. At most, he's wrong about one of them. So of these four, let's assume 3 of them are murderers. And I'm like, wait, based on what? It's just introduced as like, we're going to totally accept that one of these people is innocent, but the other 3 definitely get it. And I'm like, whoa, Agatha, where is any of that coming?
Oh, it's a totally wild assumption. But like everyone just agrees, and that is how they operate the rest of the investigation.
Cool.
Cool.
But yeah,
that's true.
Yeah.
and it's completely true. And they go about investigating, get all their information, get all the details, especially Battle from Scotland Yard is getting, solid police-like details, and people who knew them, investigating all those things. Meanwhile, Poirot is like, can I see their bridge scores?
Yeah. This is another thing I love about this novel is we talked about like the structure of like, the 4 detectives, 4 criminals, but also she's kind of showing off a little bit, and I love it because Agatha Christie writes these 4 different sleuths with 4 different approaches.
Yeah.
And if you once again, not so much race. So I think that's one of the reasons that race is maybe easily forgettable, is like he's the one with Despard, and Despard is the one of the 4 that ends up being pretty innocent. And so there's just not as much, but so you have Battle, who goes by the book, he's investigating through literally cop meetings. You have Oliver, who's thinking about it, if she was writing the case, this is what it would be. And you have Poirot, who's I'm going to take this one kind of insignificant detail about the bridge scores and show you how it's all about the facts and the details, and not about finding fingerprints and shit. Sorry, I don't know if I can curse, but
I bleep it out, don't worry.
Great. But about the actual facts and the psychology, and you can find the psychology through how they play the game, and I love that.
Yeah, it's
absolutely.
really well done. And Race goes to Egypt, and he's part of the Secret Service, and that's why he doesn't get a lot to do. He's gone for most of it. And at one point, Battle describes his method as I'm pretty much a dummy, and so I just keep pushing against a wall and just go and go and go.
Yeah, he uses his demeanor and his abilities, or lack thereof, to his advantage. He's not a bad detective by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
I know who I am, and I know what I do.
Yeah, he's very single-minded. I mean, he is the detective that we see, and I can't remember his name, but in Sherlock, there's the detective that they work with, and
Lestrade,
and you get Inspector Japp, who Poirot works with, where she's yeah, listen, I know I'm not a genius, but I'm one of those people out here just doing my job. We can't all be Poirots, so I'll just doing our best.
Basically. Yeah, so it all comes out in different ways, but we do get the stories, or at least what happened, what all of these people did that made Shaitana suspect them. And what we learn along the way is that so Roberts, the doctor had this scandal where it was thought that he was being inappropriate with one of his patients' wives, and he paid them a house call, and the next day the husband mysteriously died
with an arsenic infected razor.
Yeah.
Which apparently, I was reading today, was a thing after World War I, that was a thing that had enough that readers at the time would be oh yeah,
of course.
Sorry, it was anthrax.
Yeah,
anthrax.
The razors. That was not super common enough, but I think it was if you read a story in which a child was injured because there was a razor blade in candy at trick or treat, and you'd be oh yeah, I think that it was seemed commonplace if it wasn't really at the time.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
They even mention a specific instance of stuff a bunch of razor blades just shipped out with anthrax on it, which is
Yeah, I bet you can't do a major recall like you would these days.
Yeah, for sure.
They all got the CD along with the razor, and they're oh no.
And then later the wife moves. She moves away to a different country, and a few weeks or months later, she dies of a rare blood disorder, air quotes.
Yeah, and these are the Craddocks, right?
Yeah, the Craddocks, yeah. And this rare blood disorder, of course, is later to be found to have been he administered her vaccines before she went off to the typhoid vaccine. So he pretty stealthily got in there and did away with them nice and tidy. No scandal.
He was the one of the three murderers that's like you could most say like he planned all of this, like this is the closest I think to what we were talking about earlier of like, is this an art, right? Where like this was all planned, this was like cold calculating so that his like whole deal wasn't interrupted. Where I think you can look at the other two of Lorimer and Anne and be like, they seemed pretty like not necessarily like crimes of passion, but like not necessarily like cold and calculating in the same way.
Yeah. I mean, Lorimer is described as like very calculated, very focused, but it is also one of these things, and this is beautiful, of like when we find out that she kills her husband later on in the book, because Poirot calls on her and is like questions her and then goes, well, I'm not going to show up unless you ask me back. And then later on she does ask him back, but she's like, I murdered my husband, and then does not say how, does not say why. Yeah. She's like, that's my business and it's none of yours.
Yeah, right?
It's
and
beautiful.
Poirot, and Poirot's like, I respect that.
Cool.
Yeah. You seem great.
And that's when she tries to take the fall for Shaitana, right? When she's like, I did it, because she thinks Anne did it.
Right.
To protect herself, and she's trying to cover for Anne because Lorimer is dying. Right?
Yeah. She's found out she's very sick.
Yeah.
And
she doesn't want Anne to like waste her life or whatever. But like a lot of projecting here, Miss Lorimer.
Yeah.
And isn't in the party, don't they mention like, isn't cancer like alluded to at some point? Or am I making that up?
Maybe.
And then so it's kind of inferred that that's the situation there.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, that's what I got from it.
Yeah.
But they also, Anne was like a lady's maid to a person who did end up having cancer and sending her away.
Mrs. Benson.
Yeah. And there
Tyler
was
on top of it.
Her murder, right, if I'm remembering correctly, was like she had been stealing.
Yeah.
The employer was like onto her, so she switched medicine for like hat cleaner or something.
Yeah.
And
then Winona Ryder would have been perfect to play her.
Yeah. She accidentally drank the hat poison and died.
Yeah.
And what I love about that, and I still don't know how I feel about it, but I love a like trap, a honey trap. And he's like, I got this pile of silky clothes.
Oh, this is the best.
Which ones my nieces would like the best or whatever.
Yeah.
And, like, she steals some of them, which like, hey, please don't steal from Poirot, you idiot. Like, he's a world famous detective.
But I mean, if you're gonna steal, she steals 2 pairs. I'm like, at least you brought one for your friend.
Yeah.
Like, at least, like, you're considered in that way. If you're gonna steal for everybody.
So basically what happens is Poirot has this suspicion that she's not the type of person who's gonna, like, just kill someone because she thinks it's fun. She's gonna kill someone to protect herself.
Right.
Yeah.
So he also does this thing where he has them all tell him what they've observed in the room where they were playing bridge, and she like fixates on the jewelry. So he's like, I bet she pockets things. I bet she's like a shoplifter of her day. So he buys 19 pairs of really expensive stockings, which apparently was a huge deal. Like, everyone was wild about stockings, loved them, couldn't get enough. And so he invites her and her roommate over to his office and interviews them, and then goes in the other room to show her roommate the dagger that was used in Murder on the Orient Express, which is super fun. And while she selects, tell me which 6 pairs, I think I've got like 16 or 17 in there, pick out 6 of them that you think are great. And so he kind of is saying, like, I don't really know how many are there. And she's like, okay, great. He doesn't really know. So she pockets the 2 of them and then says, I think these are nice. And so he, of course, knows exactly how many there were, knowing that she ended up stealing 2. And that's how he puts it all together.
I don't want to skip over it, but the scene in which he goes in to buy the stockings is really funny to me.
Oh, yeah.
Because, like, everyone's like, oh, he's a creep.
Yeah, he's like, he's an old pervert.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, it's really funny.
There's a line, he's like, well, at least whatever young lady he's with is bleeding him dry. Good for her.
Yeah. Basically.
Which is amazing.
And there's a lot of like really fun little scenes in here. Like we have like a really hot sergeant or something go over an interview a maid about one of the suspects, and he's like fawning all over him, and just the little characters they introduce are really lovely.
I feel like we get more of Sergeant O'Connor than we do of Race in this book.
We do. Yeah. But so there's lots of like fun little scenes interspersed here and there on the way to finding out all of this evidence.
We should mention, so Despard, his murder ends up being that like they were on an expedition
on the Amazon,
and the like scientists do. So what was proposed, what people suspected, was that he was having an affair with this like scientist's wife. The scientist found out about it, so Despard killed him, right? And actually what ends up happening is that like the scientist caught some kind of like brain fever and was like going to drown himself, I believe. And the Despard was like trying to stop him and ended up like having to kill him to stop him from killing himself.
He tried to shoot him in the leg to stop him, and then his wife bumped into him and he shot him in the back and he died.
Yeah.
And so he took the blame for it instead of saying like, no, it's her fault.
Yeah.
Like, and so they're like, oh, cool, this guy is a good dude. Like, he's the one that Shaitana was wrong about. And also, Despard ends up forming a relationship with Anne, saying like, hey, you should get yourself a lawyer. And he also goes over and starts hanging out with her and her roommate, Rhoda.
Yeah. That's right. Yes.
Ugh, Rhoda.
Hey.
I love Rhoda.
Oh,
she's fun.
Can't stand Rhoda.
Oh no.
Rhoda is not a down ass chick. She is not ride or die. She out here telling all of Anne's business.
To be fair though, Anne sucks.
Yeah.
She does. She's a coward and a weakling, Anne.
Rhoda is the one that goes and talks to Oliver, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's what I'm talking about. Run around Rhoda just telling all Anne's business.
So yeah, we basically get the story about Anne because Rhoda goes to Mrs. Oliver and has a really lovely scene with her. Really fun scene where we get a lot of Mrs. Oliver character, like, oh, it's so hard to be a novelist stuff.
Yeah.
And she confesses to her that like she once witnessed this terrible accident where someone accidentally drank poison and it gets her very upset. Before, because Rhoda didn't know that it was her friend that murdered this lady. She thinks she's just very sensitive. But it puts Oliver on the scent. And she shares that with Battle and Poirot as well. So that's how they end up working that out.
You mentioned earlier about like this is almost like a choose your own adventure, choose your own ending. And I think it kind of really is, right? Because if you look, like there are 5 crimes solved in this book. There are 5 murders more or less solved in this book, and like by different methods in each one, right? So it's almost like it's giving you the opportunity to say like, which method do you like? Like, how do you feel about all of it? Like
if you were going to commit a murder, how would you do it?
Yeah. And if you were going to solve a murder, how would you do it? Like, that's what I kind of like, is that it gives you the chance to be like, here are 4 different people who committed murder for like 4 different reasons. How do you feel about each one, right? Because I think that we kind of alluded to this earlier, but Mrs. Lorimer being like, yeah, I murdered my husband, but I'm not going to tell you how or why because that's my business. And like, I think that there's something about that where the reader is like, I respect that, right? Like, but then when you read about Dr. Roberts killing these people, you're like, you're a monster. Yeah. And you read about Anne killing, you're like, this is like cowardly, like a rat, in a trap kind of thing. You read about Despard, you're like, oh, it turns out he's a hero for like, and it's like all of these things where we react differently to all 4 of them. And when you look at the way, not so much Race, he doesn't do a lot, but Battle, Poirot, and Oliver like handle the cases, like you have different feelings. You're like, I don't think they're going about this the right way, or like they're killing it, or they're doing great. Like we all kind of get to side with different people and feel differently about how the crimes are solved. And I think it's really interesting as far as structure goes.
Yeah, it really is. And so at the end, we basically get a J'accuse moment for 3 characters.
Yeah. Before we get there, can we talk about how they treat the doctor's wife? Not the doctor's wife, the scientist's wife.
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
They're just like, oh, she's insane. Please don't listen to her. She's absolutely nuts. She thinks I'm in love with her, which is like,
oh, yes. Okay.
You know, and it's one of these things that's always very interesting because there's been a few characters like this in the Poirot novels, and it's always strikes me as interesting that a woman writes these characters that are so stereotypically negative against women.
There's a lot of talk about hysterical women, which is one of my least favorite things. And it is always interesting to me that Agatha wrote it, and it doesn't always feel like she is writing it as a bad example of someone's opinion. Like, it's not clear whether she shares that opinion or not.
Yeah, I think I always try to consider with that, like how progressive could you be at the time?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
As a well-known, like, female writer, super popular, but also writing in a field that is dominated by dudes.
Exactly.
Would you be like, and they were wrong to judge the woman that way because sometimes guys are idiots. And it's like, whoa, hold on, that might be turning me, a 1930s guy, off of, right? Like,
oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really interesting historically speaking, like the context. But you're saying, Melissa, they have what, 3 J'accuse?
Yeah, basically. So we do have Mrs. Lorimer just talking with Poirot at the end when it comes out that she confesses. She says, I did it. And Poirot kind of talks through it with her and, you know, takes it at face value at first, but then it's like, you know what? I really don't think you did this. And she's like, but I'm saying I did. I did it. It was me.
No.
Like, nah.
I don't think it was you. No, I'm telling you it was me. No.
I'm never wrong. Excuse me.
No.
Right. So eventually he gets out of her that she is confessing to protect Anne, who she kind of sees as a, you know, she's like, the guys can take care of themselves, whatever.
Right. Victim of circumstance. This is where, like, I always inferred in reading this that, like, she sees in Anne, like, that when she was younger, when she murdered her husband, this is where I've inferred, like, it was because it was a bad situation and she was trying to get out of it the only way she could. And she has lived with that guilt and lived with the consequences of that for and like judgment from others, blah, 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 whatever. And she sees in Anne, like, reflections of herself of like, she's just a victim of circumstance. And I don't want her to suffer like the same kind of life I've led of being judged by other people. So I'm going to take the fall for it. But basically she's projecting a lot onto Anne because actually Anne sucks.
Right. Yeah. Because she really doesn't know the circumstances of Anne's murder.
Right. Yeah.
Like, she's just kind of making all these assumptions, as you say.
Yeah.
And
she even says she's projecting.
Right. Yeah, she realizes. But, you know, she's sick. She is not going to come out of this alive either way. So she might as well take the fall for it.
Right.
And so that night they kind of take they settle down. They're like, all right, well, we'll talk about this in the morning. Let's get a good night's sleep. And then we'll go to Scotland Yard. Great. Then in the morning, we find out that Mrs. Lorimer has committed suicide. And sent letters to the 3 other suspects saying, listen, I did it. Don't worry about it. And Poirot's like, oh, weird flex. Okay.
Despite him proving and getting out of her, that she's so committed to covering up for Anne that she's just like, I'm good.
Right. And so then Poirot looks into a little bit more and finds out from her housekeeper or some other such character, that she went to sleep like after Poirot left and Meredith came over and had a chat with her.
Yeah.
And Poirot's like, oh no, that seems bad. So he looks into it a little bit more, and he puts together, what they kind of put together is that Anne poisoned her, or helped her get the overdose.
Did they find marks on Lorimer's arms?
They did.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to it.
Okay.
But yeah, so basically that she poisoned her sleeping pills or whatever it was, and
as we all know, poison is a woman's way of killing.
Right, yes, Agatha makes that very clear, and that's what happened. So Poirot is like rushing to get to there. They find out that Anne is out with Rhoda in a boat
because Rhoda in a previous scene told her that she told Mrs. Oliver about the poison thing.
Okay, I might have misremembered that. I thought that they were out on the boat because Anne was jealous of Rhoda's relationship with Despard. Or is that?
I think
both. It's twofold.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because Rhoda has noticed that Despard is pretty cute, and Anne thinks he's pretty cute too.
But she's playing coy.
Yeah. So yeah.
Because she's a coward.
Right.
She's just being coy for a boy. Leave her alone.
But yeah, so they're rushing to get to her before she murders Rhoda. And everyone descends upon it. The doctor's there. Despard is there. All the detectives are there. And they get to them just in time. And this is... So it seems like what happened, what I read, is that she pulled her under and tried to drown her, and pulled Rhoda over and tried to drown her. And in the meantime, also didn't know how to swim.
Yeah, she flips the punt. She flips the punt over. They both go in the drink. And not well planned.
No, really poor planning.
Well, Rhoda should have rowed her boat ashore. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
This scene really just played out in my mind. Like, I don't know how familiar people are with The Walking Dead, like the first 3 or 4 seasons of it.
I've seen a couple seasons.
Go on, Tyler.
When Carol took those kids out to the field, they're just like, just look at the trees. Just focus on the trees.
Oh,
then proceeds to murder.
Oh no.
That was like me seeing like Anne just inviting like Rhoda out, just knowing what she's about to do.
Yeah.
Like, oh, just come out to this punt. Like, it'll be lovely. Like, what a fun afternoon this is gonna be.
Mm-hmm. Putting around.
Yeah.
And then pushes this woman off the boat.
But I think once again, like she is like the polar opposite of Dr. Roberts, where it's like this is like so poorly planned.
Yeah.
So just like simultaneously planned, but also like crime of passion, like I'm jealous of you, like I hate you, like
it's all from fear.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so it is motivated by fear, and so it is not well done.
Yeah.
And he ends up drowning because Despard jumps in and saves Rhoda.
Baller move.
Yeah, and
only gonna save my crush, sorry.
And just lets and Anne drowns.
Yeah.
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 She does.
She gets caught in the weeds or whatever, right?
Yeah, something like that.
I think we've all been there.
But yeah, she does not get pulled out in time.
What is interesting is so when in this book, right, Despard is innocent, but both Anne and Mrs. Lorimer, there's no way that they could have ever proved to the authorities like these two people a long time ago committed murder. So instead, Agatha Christie kills them.
Yep. And in a very last minute the housemaid had noted the like puncture mark in her arm, in Mrs. Lorimer's arm on the night that she died. And so then Poirot goes to Dr. Roberts and is like, you know what? It was you, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
goes through the whole poison thing, like, these are the things you did, and Battle basically is ready to throw in the towel. It's like, you don't even need to prove Shaitana. You've got Lorimer and the other two folks, so, this guy is gonna get justice. And he says, oh, but I can prove it was Shaitana, because he had gone over to kill Shaitana, and then completely, what was it?
This is where the bridge scores come in.
Yes.
Is that like this is he had, I think, of the four that Poirot talked to, he was the one who like didn't list what happened correctly or something. But in the bridge scores, there was like this rubber or runner or something that it was like this big
A grand slam.
like, yeah, a grand slam. That's it. That almost never happens. And then Poirot was like, that was the perfect time to commit the murder, and you were the only one not participating in it.
Yeah, he was the dummy hand.
Yeah.
Yep. Because everybody else was distracted, so that's when you went over and did it.
Yes. Now because we also get out of someone at some point that because Anne goes over to the body, and that's why Mrs. Lorimer thinks that Anne killed.
Yeah.
But he was already dead.
Mm-hmm.
And what I had thought had happened, and I thought this would have been interesting, but come on, Agatha, read my mind, was if the doctor had already poisoned Shaitana, and then Anne had also stabbed him.
Mm-hmm.
But that is not the case. It was
that was in a draft somewhere for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Miss Lorimer came over and choked him.
Yeah.
And then
Another murder on the
Poirot came over and just like shook his hand and said, "We'll talk about this later."
Yeah.
And then Poirot picked him up and walked around a beach house for a weekend.
And then it's kind of implied that Despard and Rhoda have a cute little moment.
Mm.
And that's the end of the book.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we should take a bit of a break. And we're back.
Mm-hmm. So what did y'all think? As Travis, as the guest, you can go first.
So I really like this book. I don't think that it is, like, if somebody was like, I'm going to start reading Poirot novels, where should I start? I do not think this is the best example of them. I think that this is like a deviation from form because of the like 4 criminals, 4 thing. But I think that as what I really see it as is like Agatha Christie saying, I'm going to mix it up a little bit. I'm going to like have a different kind of take on this. And like, here's 5 crimes and 4 sleuth. And like, so it's very interesting to me. It is a good kind of shake up of her normal thing. I think that some of it is not perfect. Like we've talked about, race doesn't do a lot. There's a lot of like, and of course we all can agree that if this thing is true, then this thing is true. And it's like, I guess. So I think that this is a really, really solid one. But I wouldn't like put it in my top 5 or anything.
Okay.
On a scale of 1 to 10, what would you give it?
I think I'd give it like a solid 8.5. Like
nice.
8.5.
All right.
Where like my 10 on this scale is like Murder on the Orient Express. Or like that to me is like I can read that one again and again and again and again.
Yeah. Tyler, what did you think?
I think this is like 8 and a chaplain for me. 8 mustaches and a chaplain. I did really enjoy that this is the type of crime that Poirot had essentially dreamed about in the ABC murders.
Yes.
So I like that little tie-in, and I also kind of get now why Jesus probably thought it was boring.
Yeah.
I love there's so many moments in this book that I wanted us to talk about. We just did not have the time to get to that were like my favorite moments of the book. See, I really enjoyed it from beginning to end. Like, it wasn't, my favorite because of how everything unfolded. I thought Dr. Roberts was like kind of like the easy go-to, especially when Poirot alludes to it pretty early on that he notices Roberts in a way that is reminiscent of when Shaitana and Poirot are first speaking in the first chapter. And they talk about this idea of the dinner party and how it would work. And Poirot starts talking about like, oh, that's just like, I enjoy looking at tigers, but I enjoy looking at tigers from a distance. Like, I'm not going to go up to a tiger and admire it. And he notices when he interviews Roberts the first time that Roberts walks like a tiger. And I thought that was really clever.
I really like, by the way, that in that discussion that you were talking about is like, he really paints Poirot's like, I'm not deluded. I'm not into solving crimes because I'm some adrenaline junkie. It's like where it feels like Shaitan is like taken in by like the kind of sexy side of murder, and Poirot's just like, this is my job. Like I'm not like super horny for murder. Like what are you talking about?
I do not know.
Of course he is. We have a whole shirt that says horny for murder for that reason.
Some people just have to make a living. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. I also really liked it. I gotta take some points off for like little things here and there as well, but it's a super easy, digestible read, as I said earlier. Like, makes you feel smart. Lots of twists and turns. I love a twist and a turn. And I'm also going to give it an 8.5.
I want to get, before we get to my rating, because I'm stalling because I'm thinking about it. Who, when you were first reading the book, who did you think did it?
Roberts.
The first time I read it, I think I was actually kind of with you. I thought it was like a Shaitana setup of like, he did it to himself, and that was going to be the big reveal, and he was bragging about like he committed a murder that could never be solved because he killed himself. I don't know. I thought it was something like that, where it's going to be they were all guilty of their crimes, but none of them killed Shaitan or something like that.
I thought it was Anne. I thought it was Anne Meredith.
Okay. Yeah, because like that's something that confused me. I don't know, like I do like that at the end of the book, the proxy for Mrs. Oliver says at the beginning of the book, it's either the doctor or Anne, obviously. And then they also allude a couple of times to Anne going, well, Rhoda says, well, it's always the least obvious person, and Anne's like, well, that's clearly me, so I hope that's not the case, which is like brag much. But yeah, I mean, for me, it could have been more exciting and more interesting, but I agree with the structure of it. It's very easily read and digested. I'll give it I think a 7. Like, it wasn't my favorite. I was kind of confused by the end for whatever reason, because of for whatever reason, Dr. Roberts like didn't stand out to me as suspicious, so I was surprised by that.
He got put aside at the beginning of the book. Like, we didn't really see much of him. He like got an interview, and then we didn't really hear much about him. We were talking about Anne Meredith for like most of the book, I feel like.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, which made it clear that wasn't her to me. So I guess I just didn't pay attention to that part. But yeah, it was fine enough. It's no Murder of Roger Ackroyd, but it's
Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Near and dear. So good.
But yeah. Travis.
Yes.
Do you have final thoughts, and also where can people find all the stuff that you do?
Oh, they can find me everywhere. You can find me at Travis McElroy on Twitter. You can go to McElroy.family to see all the McElroy projects.
Great.
Fantastic. Thank you so much again for being on. You're actually our first ever guest.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
This was big for us. Thanks
for having me.
Such a joy to have you here today.
Very, very exciting. Yeah, go listen to Taz Graduation. And I'm a couple episodes behind, but it's really fun, and Travis is the DM for that over on the Adventure Zone.
And I'm doing my best, and I'm really proud of it.
Yeah, it is.
It's a really fun world. Yeah, really enjoying being there.
Yeah, I was suspicious of the premise, And then what I want to say is, Travis, you and your family do such a fine job that I love it. It's very strong.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Great.
All right, Tyler.
All right,
you
I
want to
now
take it?
call. Sorry.
No, do your thing.
Okay. I now call this meeting of the Amateur Detective Club to a close.
Gavel sounds.
Thank you very much.
And I have ceased recording.
I have stopped recording as well. I will give this to Danielle to send to you guys right away.
Thank you.
And again, my sincerest apologies for the difficulties on my end today.
Oh, it happens to me all the time.
Oh, yeah. It's fine.
All right. It was a pleasure talking to you. I got to run away to go, take the kids.
Ugh. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it was an absolute pleasure. You guys have a great day.
You too.
Thank you
Thank you so
too.
much.
Stay safe out there.
Bye.
Bye.